What did you do if you came face to face with something 10 feet tall in the dead of night, its head glowing red, its body shimmering like metal, and a hiss so unnatural it'd chill you right to the bone? Back in 1952, a group of folks in Flatwoods, West Virginia, claim that's exactly what happened. Was it something from another world? A government secret gone bad, or something even stranger? Stick around as we dig into the eerie tale of the Flatwoods Monster, a story that's been haunting these Appalachian hills for over 70 years. This time, y'all, we're wandering just over the state line to our neighbors in West Virginia to check out an eerie tale that's been spooking folks for decades. If you love uncovering the strange and mysterious, be sure to check out more of our stories right here on Kentucky Melody. From haunting hills to ghostly hollers, we're bringing you the best of Appalachia's creepy legends. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. 'Cause the strange and spooky don't stop here. It was the evening of September 12th, 1952, in the quiet little town of Flatwoods, West Virginia. That's when something mighty strange happened that folks still whisper about to this day. Brothers Edward and Fred May, along with their buddy Tommy Heyer, were playing outside like boys do on a crisp fall evening. But all of a sudden, the three of them stopped dead in their tracks. There, blazing across the sky like the devil himself, was a streak of fire, a bright red light with a tail glowing green cutting through the air before it disappeared behind a hill. Well, the boys weren't wasting no time. They tore back home, breathless, to tell their mama, Kathleen May, what they'd just seen. Now, Miss Kathleen wasn't the kind of woman to brush off her young'un's stories, not when they looked so spooked. She grabbed the boys, their friend Tommy, and a couple curious neighbors, Neil Nunley, Gene Lemon, and Lemon's old hound dog, and they set off up to the Bailey Fisher farm to see what was going on. Now, folks in Flatwoods didn't scare easy. These were coal miners, farmers, and hard-working people used to noises in the woods and critters rustling in the brush. But that night the woods felt different. As they walked up the hill, the air started changing. It got heavy, like something was pressing down on them. Miss Kathleen later said it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Up ahead, Gene Lemon's dog ran on ahead, yipping excitedly. But not for long. That old dog let out a yelp that made everyone freeze in their tracks. Then he bolted right back down the hill, tail tucked tight. That was the first sign something was terribly wrong. When they reached the top of that hill, the night seemed to close in around them, thicker than it ought to been. And there it was, a strange, pulsing green mist, hanging low over the ground like a living thing. It was so dense it clung to the grass and trees, making everything look warped, like the air itself was twisted. The stuff was thick enough to sting their eyes and make their throats burn, an acrid metallic smell that hit like a slap to the face. It reeked of burning wires like something mechanical had been torn apart and set ablaze. They all covered their noses, trying to block out the stench, but it was no use. That smell got right into your head. Just as the group tried to make sense of the mist, Neil Nunley's voice cut through the silence, low and trembling. "Over there," he whispered, pointing toward the trees at the far edge of the hill. That's when they saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, a hulking shape that didn't look quite right. Then it moved. Out of the shadows stepped a thing, 10 feet tall if it was an inch. Its head was round and smooth, glowing a fierce, fiery red like a coal fresh from the hearth. Surrounding that head was a hood, dark and pointed, shaped like the spade on a playing card, and it framed that eerie glow like a crown. The body was even stranger. It shimmered, catching the light of the glowing mist, and it looked like metal plates, all segmented and shiny, as though it was wearing armor from some kind of nightmare. But the most unnerving part, it didn't walk. It glided. Smooth as ice on a frozen pond, the thing just floated toward him, like the ground beneath it didn't even matter. Gene Lemon, clutching his flashlight like it was the only weapon he had, swung the beam straight at the creature. The second the light hit it, the thing let out a sound that sent shivers running down every spine on that hill. It wasn't a scream exactly, but a hiss, long and low, like steam pouring out a busted pipe, but deeper, angrier. The mist around it began to churn, like it was alive, wrapping itself around the creature's legs, or what should have been legs, and twisting up like smoke from a fire. They all froze, rooted to the spot as if the air itself had locked them in place. The creature's head didn't just glow, it seemed to pulse, thrumming with an energy none of them could understand. It stared at them, or at least they thought it did. There weren't no eyes, just that unblinking red light bore straight into their souls. For what felt like forever, no one moved. The group just stood there, eyes wide, breaths caught, while that thing glided closer and closer. Then it moved faster. That was all Miss Kathleen needed to snap out of her trance. She grabbed her boys by their arms and hollered, "Run!" The sound of her voice jolted the others, and Gene Lemon turned on his heel so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. The whole group took off down the hill, their legs moving as fast as fear could carry them. Behind them, the hiss seemed to grow louder, filling the air with a sound that didn't belong. They didn't stop running till they were well past the ridge, down where the woods started to thin out, and their lungs were screaming for air. Only then did they dare to glance back. The hilltop was quiet. The green mist that had seemed so alive was gone, like it had never been there at all. And that creature, it vanished just as suddenly, leaving behind only the echo of that terrible sound and a feeling none of them would ever shake. Kathleen pulled her boys close, her eyes darting back toward the ridge. "We ain't going back up there," she said, her voice shaken but steady with resolve, and none of them argued. Whatever they'd seen, it wasn't something they wanted to meet again. That hill wasn't just strange anymore. It was something else entirely. And they'd all swear on their lives that something out of this world had been waiting for 'em up there. The group didn't waste a second catching their breath. Still shaken and breathless, they hurried back into town, their words spilling over one another as they tried to make sense of what they'd just seen. First stop was the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Robert Carr, a big man with a reputation for not taking to nonsense, listened to their story with a furrowed brow. While he was a skeptic by nature, he couldn't ignore the panic on their faces, or the way the usually tough-as-nails Kathleen May was trembling as she described that monstrous figure. Not wanting the story to get out of hand without some kind of investigation, Sheriff Carr rounded up a posse that included A. Lee Stewart, a newspaper man for the Braxton Democrat. Stewart was always keen for a good headline, and from the way folks were talking, this one would be a doozy. Together, they all headed back up to that hill, lanterns and flashlights in hand, ready to see for themselves what kind of critter, or contraption, had scared the group so bad. When they reached the ridge, the strange green mist was long gone, as though it had never been there to begin with. The night was quiet now, but there was something about the air that still felt wrong. Sheriff Carr noticed it first, skid marks in the dirt, not like tire tracks, but something wider and deeper, like something heavy had been dragged across the ground. Nearby, They found patches of slick, oily residue, a dark, greasy stain that seemed to shimmer under their flashlights. Carr bent down to touch it, then quickly wiped his fingers on his pants with a disgusted grunt. Whatever it was, it sure didn't belong there. Lee Stewart poked around with his notepad in hand, jotting down every detail. He'd seen a lot of strange things in his time covering stories for the Democrat, but this was something else. He kept looking over his shoulder, like he half expected that thing to come gliding out of the woods again. "I don't know what y'all saw up here," he muttered to Kathleen, "but it wasn't nothing natural." Sheriff Carr, usually the picture of confidence, stood silent for a long moment, his hand resting on his hip. Finally, he said, "Well, I don't know what to make of it, but something sure as hell happened up here tonight." That was as close as he'd ever come to admit there might be more to the world than what he could see or touch. Back in town, the story spread like wildfire. Everybody had an opinion, and most weren't shy about sharing it. The skeptics, and there were plenty, said it was nothing more than a meteor streaking across the sky. That fiery light, just a space rock burning up on entry. As for the creature, they claimed it was likely a barn owl, sitting up in a tree, its wings spread wide to make it look bigger than it was. "Them big ol' owls got eyes that glow red in the light," one fella said, puffing on his pipe like he had it all figured out. "Spook you good if you ain't expectin' it." And the green mist? Folks wagged their heads knowingly. Probably sulfur gas seeping up from the ground, or maybe something stirring in the humid night air. They had all kinds of logical explanations, but those who were there that night, they knew better. Kathleen May was downright furious at the barn owl talk. "I know what an owl looks like," she told anyone who'd listen. "What we saw wasn't no bird. It was something else. Something unnatural." She swore up and down that what they'd seen was real. 10 feet tall, metallic, gliding smooth as butter, with that terrible hissing sound that still haunted her dreams. The other witnesses backed her up. Gene Lemon, usually a tough young man, couldn't talk about it without his hands shaking. Even the neighbors who hadn't been there but knew Kathleen and her boys vouched for 'em, saying they weren't the kind to make up wild stories. The tension in the air around Flatwoods lasted for weeks, with folks whispering in hushed tones and side-eyeing the hills like they expected the creature to show up again. But it didn't. Whatever had come to that ridge seemed to vanish as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving nothing behind but a few strange marks in the dirt, a slick stain no one could explain, and a story that would echo through the years. Even today, some folks will tell you the skeptics were full of hot air, that the people on that ridge knew the truth, and the truth was far stranger than any owl. Over the years, folks have argued up, down, and sideways about what really happened on that hilltop in Flatwoods. The truth is, no one's ever been able to pin it down, and the story's grown thicker than a foggy holler. Sure, some people think it's all nonsense, a combination of frightened imaginations and natural explanations. But those who were there that night would tell you plain and simple. It wasn't no owl or swamp gas. One of the most talked about ideas is that what the group saw that night was something not of this world, maybe even a visitor from beyond the stars. See, the night didn't start with that creature. It started with a bright light streaking across the sky, a fiery object that fell right over the ridge like something crash-landing. Folks who believed this theory figure that the Flatwoods Monster wasn't just some random visitor. It was connected to whatever came down from the sky. Maybe it was part of the craft itself, or maybe it was a being that crawled out of a wrecked ship, wandering around looking for help, or something else. That green mist Could have been something leaking out of the ship, something so unnatural that it burned to breathe. Then there's the more conspiratorial idea, a government cover-up. This was the 1950s, right smack in the middle of UFO hysteria, with the Cold War looming and tensions high. Some say that what fell that night wasn't alien at all, but something experimental, a military craft or secret technology that the government didn't want folks getting wind of. The monster could have been a mechanical piece of that equipment, something never meant to be seen by regular folks. There's even whispers that the government came in quick, swept up any evidence, and left the people of Flatwoods with nothing but a spooky story. Makes you wonder why the air smelled so foul up there and why the ground had those oily marks. Maybe something was cleaned up before too many questions got asked. Now, the skeptics have always been loud about their explanation. They chalk the whole thing up to a barn owl sitting on a tree limb, caught in the flashlight beam. Owls got them big, reflective eyes that can glow red in the dark, and their wings, if spread just right, might look like a hooded figure. The hissing noise? They say that's the natural sound of a startled owl, or the wind blowing through the trees. That green mist could have been swamp gas or fumes rising up from the ground. Sure, it sounds plausible on paper, but tell me, does an owl move smooth as ice like the way Miss Kathleen described? Does it send a group of grown folks tearing down a hill in terror? Then there's the stranger theories, the ones that'll really get your mind spinning. Some people think the Flatwoods Monster wasn't from outer space at all, but from another dimension entirely. Appalachia's full of places folks say are thin, where the line between worlds ain't so sturdy. Maybe something slipped through that night, drawn in by the fireball in the sky, only to vanish again before anyone could make sense of it. That might explain why the creature didn't leave tracks or why the mist disappeared so fast. It wasn't part of this world, so it didn't stick around for long. But maybe the most unsettling idea is this. What if it's still out there? Folks love to tell stories about cryptids and monsters roaming these hills and hollers, from the Mothman up north to the hillbilly beast down in Kentucky. 3 years after the Flatwoods incident, the Kelly Hopkinsville family down in Kentucky had their own encounter with strange creatures. Small, glowing-eyed goblins that surrounded their house after a UFO flew overhead. Sounds like a coincidence, right? But maybe it ain't. Maybe something's been moving through these mountains, something we don't understand. When you stand on that hilltop today, it's easy to feel the weight of what happened there. Was it a meteor? A mechanical visitor? A spirit from another place? Or something much stranger? The folks who saw it can't all be wrong, and whatever it was, it didn't want to be found. No one's seen the Flatwoods Monster since that night, but I wouldn't go calling it gone. Stories like this don't fade for no reason. Some say it's still out there, waiting in the shadows, gliding through the trees when the sky goes dark and the air gets still. And if you're ever up there on a quiet night, maybe you'll see the glow of red eyes staring back at you, just like they did all them years ago. Whether it was from this world or another, one thing's for sure. Flatwoods ain't never been the same since that night. Today, Flatwoods has turned its monster into a bit of local pride. There's a museum, festivals, and even monster-themed souvenirs. But for folks who still wander those woods late at night, that story don't feel like no tall tale. So, if you ever find yourself in Flatwoods, West Virginia, looking up at the stars or standing under them dark trees, keep an ear out for that hiss and a watchful eye on the shadows. 'Cause whatever came to Flatwoods that night might still be out there, waiting. Some stories fade, but some monsters never really leave. So, what do y'all think? Was the Flatwoods Monster something not of this world? A strange critter that slipped through the cracks? Or just a case of imaginations running wild? Maybe you reckon it was something else entirely, an owl, swamp gas, or even a secret the government don't want us talking about. We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you think really happened that night in Flatwoods, West Virginia. And don't forget, if you love hearing about eerie tales like this one, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell. There's always another story waiting in the shadows, and we'll be right here to tell it. And don't wander too far now. Our next tale might just be closer than you think. Keep your eyes open and your lights on, 'cause we'll be back real soon with another story that'll have you looking over your shoulder.